everybody. Pete Bloodworth with Corrections Unfiltered, podcast where corrections meets conversation. Tonight, we have a great opportunity to speak to Robert Sorensen. Robert is the Corrections Sections Chair for the National Tactical Officers Association, the Ntoa. But Robert has quite a history in corrections. He's been through a lot of tragic incidents. Because of his background, because of what he's experienced, he also knows that the high-level training has to be provided so that we can have high performance in the field. And that's what drives Robert's passion and his desire to make sure that the training in the Ntoa is the highest level you can achieve. Let's get in this podcast, talk to Robert. Let's hear about his history, and let's find out what the Ntoa is up to. Thank you, everybody. Got the podcast going. Chris McConnell, how you doing, sir?
Good. How's everyone doing?
Charlie Bueno.
Good to see everybody. Thank you.
And I want to introduce everybody to Robert Sorensen. Robert, as a person that I happened to rub elbows with a couple of times in my former agency, he's had a very stellar career. He's been into many different facets as far as corrections, and he's also been involved in some of the most tragic and difficult incidents that you can possibly manage. So let's get into this podcast. So, hey, Robert, how you doing today?
Great, guys. Great to be here with you guys.
We really appreciate you being here. Do you want to go ahead and give us some of your background, what got you into corrections, how you kind of maneuvered your career, and then we'll start talking about some of the incidents you've been involved with.
Absolutely. It's actually kind of a pretty funny story. Never in a million years did I ever think I was going to end up in the corrections world. I originally wanted to go to school. I went to 1 year of college. I wanted to be a biology teacher. And that was my goal in life. I wanted to be a biology teacher. And like little kids growing up in Northeast Pennsylvania, didn't have a lot of money. And so I decided I was going to join the military, and that was going to help me pay for my college. Recruiters kind of convinced me to be an MP. So I went to MP school. I was a 95 Bravo. And one of the guys that was in my reserve unit with me worked at FCI Loretto. Said, "Hey, Bob, why don't you put in for the feds? It's a great job. Go from there." So I said, "What the heck?" So I put in, and I didn't get hired at FCI Loretto. I got hired at USP Allenwood. So I started my career at USP Allenwood in 1997. And I started out as a correctional officer there. And through my career, I left USP Allenwood in 2005. I was promoted to a GS9 lieutenant at FCI Raybrook up in Lake Placid, New York. It was cold up there and expensive, and I knew my wife wanted to get back home to Northeast Pennsylvania, where we both grew up. And Scranton, Pennsylvania just just built a brand new prison, USP Canaan. It's in Northeast PA. So I applied to go to Northeast PA back home at USP Canaan as a GS11 lieutenant, and I got selected in January of 2007. I was a GS11 lieutenant for 2012, and I was promoted to an emergency preparedness officer. So that was a lot of fun. And I know, Pete, you kind of had did some ground pounding as an EPO, and that was some of the best times that I've had. Chris, are you as well? Best times I've ever had, and some of the funnest stuff I've ever been able to do, and trainings I've been able to coordinate, really kind of piqued my interest as my time as an EPO. I did that until 2020. And in 2020, I transferred as a special agent down to our internal affairs division in Washington, D.C. And I retired after 27 years in January 2024. So that kind of sums up my bureau career. Bouncing around a little bit, had different roles, but a lot of interesting things and a lot of interesting people I've had through that process.
Hey, Bobby, and welcome to Corrections Unfiltered.
Thank you.
U.S. Army, HUA.
Here we go.
Thank you for your service. Full transparency, I have known you for probably 25 years. We work together. Our career paths are very similar, and we are very like-minded. My first question to you is, though, when you were a shift supervisor at a high-security penitentiary, 2 disturbances broke out. Some shift supervisors will never see a disturbance or riot in their entire career, but all shift supervisors must be prepared to manage that incident. Looking back, can you walk us through what it was like to manage the initial response and what was some of the important lessons you learned?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I got to USP Canaan in January of 2007. So I was working the evening watch shift, which is 4 to midnight. And at that particular time, USP Canaan had approximately 1,200 to 1,300 inmates. I don't recall, but it was a high max security penitentiary in Northeast PA, big prison. From one end of that prison to the other end is about 400 yards. So it's a hike. I don't know if you've ever had to run 400 yards and have to fight or wrestle or do whatever you got to do, but it's not an easy race. I don't care how good of shape you're in. So anyway, I was working the evening watch shift, one correctional officer per unit with about 110 inmates in each unit. And there was 12 total housing units. This is about 7 o'clock at night. And I get a call from my recreation officer, and I was running mainline, which where they serve the food. At one end of the institution, the gymnasium, the inside recreation is 400 yards away. So that's all the way at the other end. And the recreation officer calls me and says, "Hey, LT, we got 2 groups of inmates kind of separating down here. You might want to come down here." So at this particular time in my career, and we'll talk about it later, but I had no idea what safety priorities were. But it's kind of it's how we make tough tactical decisions a little bit easier. And I had no idea what those were. And so I called one of my officers and I said, "Can you do me a favor? Just grab that." We had a 1 response bag in our control center full of like 3 sting balls. And we had a pepper ball launcher. And I believe we had a 37 millimeter multi-launcher full of 60 caliber Stinger balls. That's about all the less lethal munitions we had at that particular time. The officers didn't have pepper spray. We had a radio and keys. So I walked down to the gymnasium and I see inmates on both sides of the gym. I immediately know, because we've always taught to isolate and contain, right? So I wanted to I had them lock the door, and then I called for an immediate recall to all the inmates that were out and about, and for the officers in the housing units to go ahead and secure their cells with the inmates in them, right? Because we don't want the inmates to kind of spill over. So I remember that training, and I remember that's one thing I'm automatically supposed to do is isolate and secure. So I did that. I remember looking through the window, and all hell broke loose where inmates just started. It looked like a mass of people just fighting. They were throwing locks and socks, and there was weapons in there we recovered. So it was mayhem. I called for an emergency response cart. An emergency response cart, it looks like a golf cart, and it has an A-frame over top of it, just loaded with almost every single less lethal munition that you can think of. And that cart is located in the Sally port down by Control Center, where you'd have to break glass, get the key, and get it out. That's 410 yards away from where we were at. So I called for that emergency response cart, and I have maybe 6 officers with me that can respond to actually go into the gym and deal with that issue. So safety priorities. Safety priorities are broken down into 4 different things, right? So we have hostages first. If we have hostages, we know that that's the most important or most dangerous thing that we have to deal with. The second one would be innocent civilians. If there's innocents around. The third would be officers, which would be us. And then the fourth would be like your subject or suspects, the inmates. I have no idea what these even are. Never heard of that before. Never prioritized anything like that. But I certainly know that I didn't want to send myself or my officers inside of that gym and kind of deal with about 200 inmates that were in there fighting and just not listening, right? Waiting for the emergency response cart. Never comes. Never makes it down there. I only had that 1 bag full of about 2 or 3 sting balls, pepper ball launcher, and an L8. I don't care how tough you are, how tactically sound you think you are. If you're not scared or you're not afraid of what could happen, then you need to reevaluate yourself, because that's going to be there. And getting past, being afraid is one thing, but getting through that and making sound decisions is really important. And we'll talk about it when we start looking about training, but you don't rise to the occasion. You're not going to fight like James Bond or shoot like Jason Bourne, under stress. It doesn't happen. It's not going to happen. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your level of training. And if you're not doing good sound quality training, how can you be expected to make good quality decisions? That falls in line with knowing policy, procedures, knowing the law, knowing use of force, what you can do, what you can't do. Those are skills that if you don't practice, you lose. And so how can you make good decisions under circumstances, especially stress like that? So I look back at that, and as I've matured through the years, I understand kind of what I was going through. So emergency response cart never shows up. One of my officers looks at me and goes, "Hey, boss, we need to go in there." I turned to my officers and I said, "Okay, guys, are you sure? You sure we're ready to go?" I didn't have an emergency response card. I had 3 sting balls. And they said, "Yes, sir, let's do it." And I said, "Okay." And so we opened that door and we threw 1 sting ball in there, and all the inmates got all over to the ground and laid right down. So saved the day. Saved the day. So basically, that munition, that 1 sting ball, did exactly what we needed it to do. And all the inmates got down on the ground. Not one staff member was injured. That one inmate ended up, we had to take him out on an emergency trip. The inmates that were assaulting him I think they got 8 years, 7 or 8 years. The U.S. attorneys charged them. And so that's a win, right? That's a win at the end of the day. But I was scared to death. I was a pretty fresh, new GS-11 lieutenant that thought he knew it all, cocky as all get out.
You know, we talk about things on these podcasts, and there's a perfect example of, okay, this job that we have to do, you're sitting there saying, okay, you look at all your officers and say, okay, we sure? What person in their right mind wants to do this? You know, you're standing there in front of a door with 50, 60 guys fighting, and your lieutenant looks at you and says, "All right, boys, we're going in." Who? You know, it's like, and how are we the lost kind of the professions that put on the back burners? You know,
I'll tell you what, man, I was scared. I was scared. I was scared for myself. I was scared for my officers. I was scared for what I didn't know what I didn't know, to be honest with you.
But you still did your job.
Yes.
And cared about everybody that was with you. You know, regardless, they're inmates. You're the people that are paid to protect them, but you still went and put yourself in harm's way.
Yeah. So that was the first large scale disturbance that I had, with 200 some inmates. Now, Chris asked me what I learned from that as a supervisor. Now, at the time, I learned that I was lucky. Looking back through the years and being able to really analyze what we did right and what we did wrong, I can see where I failed as a lieutenant, as a supervisor, and it's a lesson that I kind of took with me from that specifically, is that emergency response cart. I had one of my technicians, my SIS tech, whose office was down there. I called for that emergency response cart as soon as I called for a lockdown or, a recall of all the inmates. And I was waiting for that cart because I knew I didn't want to go in there without any type of less lethal. Never showed up. And so it finally did. And that officer that brought it down was soaked in sweat. And when he got that cart out, all 4 tires were flat. And so he had to push that cart over 400 yards and try to steer it running down there. And he made it. So lesson that I learned from that is never once in that time from January to November of 2007 did I ever break that cart out and check those tires. Never once in that time frame did I ever take any of those pieces of equipment off that cart and teach my guys and gals, my people, my officers, how to use that equipment, what the less lethal munitions were capable of. I never ran tabletops with them. I never did minor mock exercises incorporating that type of stuff that could go wrong. So that was a big, valuable lesson for me, that I never wanted to not have those tools at my ready. So after that, man, I was known as the mock exercise, and that probably helped me get that emergency preparedness job, to be honest with you, because I would do mock exercises, tabletops. And they knew when I started walking away after recall that we were going to do some type of drill or something like that. I learned a lot from that. I learned a very valuable lesson from that. So if we fast forward to 2009, I was known for the Black Cloud lieutenant for a little bit. I'm still a day watch operations lieutenant. We know a couple of them, don't we, Chris? Black Cloud.
We do.
But I was working day watch, which is the 8 to 4 shift. So you have a lot more staff that are available. And this was January. we had a brand new captain come in, and usually when you have new administration or new captain come in, they kind of want to set the tone. And so what we did is we did mass shakedowns. We were going to take every single housing unit for about a 2-week time period and just do a mass shakedown and clean it out, get all as much contraband as we can. So we moved all 200 inmates, put them down in the gym. That night, they apparently got upset because we took some stuff that they didn't think we would take, and they wanted to negotiate with the captain that we couldn't just search their cell and just take stuff like this, and we should return some of the stuff. So the captain, being the captain who he was, which is a great individual, said, you know what? We're doing that unit again tomorrow. And so that's a way of doing business. And we can kind of see where it leads to. But that, sure enough, when we came in the next morning, we moved them down to the gym and started doing a shakedown. Well, I get a call. Hey, LT, you might want to come down to the gym. I got groups of inmates grouping up. And I'm thinking, geez, deja vu. And what? I had an emergency response cart. I have a lot more staff. So I get down there and I see 2 groups of inmates grouped up on the gym. And I have a lot of staff with me. So we have a better plan to go in and kind of deal with it. We lock down the institution and we open up the door and we throw 8 sting balls in there. Now, sting balls in the first incident only took 1, and all those inmates dove for the ground, got on the ground as quick as they could. 8 of these sting balls had a negative effect on these guys. We actually had to enter, and we used pepper balls, and we had 37 millimeter in there. And I was scared in this one too. I'm not gonna lie to you. I thought we were going to be hooking and jabbing when we opened up that door, because I thought the sting balls would work. And so we go in, we get weapons out of that disturbance. But what the difference was, and looking back, I understand now, is I always talk about the munition being the munition. Sting ball is a sting ball, man. Whether I use it inside a gym or I use it outside, it's designed to operate in a single manner, in the same way. It did what it was supposed to do in the first incident. It did what it was supposed to do in the second incident. But what the difference was is the individuals that we were facing. And I learned a lesson on that. I learned that the first incident, who were they mad at? Who were they fighting with? They were fighting with each other. And when they fight with each other, they look for an excuse to stop. And so understanding the mindset of your adversary is huge in tactical planning. And when you're looking at contingency planning for incidents like this, it's really important that you understand who you're dealing with and what you're dealing with. So they were mad at each other, looking for an excuse to stop. It's like driving up to a bar fight, and as soon as the police get there, what do? Next guy sucker punches the next guy. Why? Because he knows the police are going to jump in and save his butt so he doesn't get hurt too awful bad. Second incident, who were they mad at? They were mad at us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, knowing that totally changed the mindset of the individual or your adversary, I always talk about. And so they were directed at us. And so when you're dealing with inmates that are focused on you, you better have contingencies. You better have different ways of dealing with them, because what you've used in the past may not work. And so I learned a valuable lesson on that as well. And I use that to this day.
You know, and that's exactly what I was going to talk about is you mentioned it many times so far, is that you're going to rise to the level of your training. And many times there will be shift supervisors, or there'll be people who are involved in some kind of a drill, and they're just doing it as sort of a checklist type system. Okay, we did this. Okay, we got the emergency keys. Okay, but like you said, when that stress level hits, it is a whole different type of game, and your mind is going to lock up and freeze. And so that's why that training is so important, because it builds that repetition in. And we know that if we have that repetition, there's a lot better chance that we're going to be able to make those decisions in a timely way, and we're going to function more properly. So,
you know, and probably the biggest lesson that I've learned is you cannot let your ego dictate your actions. And, you know, when I was young and not real smart, you know, like we all are, kind of let your ego kind of take over on stuff. And looking back, you have to be a student of the game, and you have to be willing to learn. I would learn something from, you know, my military time. I was never in combat. You know, I was too young for Desert Storm, and I was too old when we went back over. So my period of time in the Army, I never had live combat. So a lot of these new officers coming in, they've seen some live combat. And so if you don't think you can learn something from somebody that has a week on the job or somebody that has 30 years on the job based on your position or title, you're wrong. And so that's one thing that I learned from that is you need to be humbled and you need to be able to be taught and take an honest evaluation of your actions and do an honest after action on what you do and what you don't do, and don't take it personal. So I did learn that.
A lot of times those emergency situations, especially to that level, will make staff more apprehensive to come back and report to work. What was that like?
So you're always going to have a couple staff members that want to stay locked down as long as possible, right? We all know those guys that guys and gals that want to stay locked down as long as possible and slow everything down as long as they can. As far as kind of getting back up, you know what really helps is leadership. When you have lieutenants that they feel confident in, like middle level management, and then not only that, but you have a captain and you have executive staff level that exude leadership and know that they're going to make the right decisions under the right times. People are more apt to come back to work quicker. For the most part, everybody was happy to be there.
Hey, Bob, on
Yeah.
on February 25th, 2013, a sad day in the Federal Bureau of Prisons history, a fellow law enforcement brother, Senior Officer Eric Williams, was killed by an inmate at USP Canaan. As a leader at that institution, how did you approach supporting staff during such a tense and emotional time? And how did you reassure staff when their safety concerns were heightened?
Yeah, this is heavy. That I was the emergency preparedness officer during that time, and I actually had a major mock exercise planned for that morning, and so I was up early that morning, getting around, and I lived about an hour away from Canaan at the time, and I was getting ready to go in and do that major mock exercise, and so when people were arriving, they actually thought that was part of the exercise. So it took a minute for people to kind of realize what happened. The lieutenant that was on duty that night, that was there, I can't say enough good things about the way that he handled that situation. Um, he he handled it with professionalism. As far as staff kind of doing their job, they didn't miss a beat. That staff were stellar, and again, it's because of the leadership that we had. Um, Warden Ebert was our warden at the time. That's well known. Um, he was the right individual at that right time for that institution for that, and I'm forever thankful for Dave Ebert and for his leadership during that. All the way down, the whole staff at the time was wonderful. I remember the warden going around and asking the staff, "Hey, what can I do? What do you guys need?" And every single staff member said to the warden, "We got this, boss. We got this." And if you look at this big rock that's outside of USP Canaan to this day, it was a rock out there with nothing on it. And Warden Ebert had them come in and put "We got this" on that rock. So if you go to USP Canaan right in the front, there's going to be a rock there that says "We got this." And that is specifically because that couple days after Eric's homicide, every staff member said, "We got this, sir. We got this. We're okay." And that's how we rolled.
And to the family members of Officer Williams, our blessings are with you. We know that the Bureau of Prisons still stands behind them. We also know that all of correction stands behind them. Thanks, Robert, for sharing that story. And as you were telling it, I remembered I've got an Officer Williams challenge coin right here, and it's always on my display. So
that challenge coin, we designed that challenge coin, and I kind of spearheaded that challenge coin. That's the gold one. We made some silver ones, but that gold one, we took, and Eric's, and I got to say this, Eric's mom and dad are salt of the earth. Those individuals have done more for the safety of officers than anybody that I can think of in a long time. They got the pepper spray for the Bureau of Prisons. They got the stab vest for the Bureau of Prisons. And that's a direct result of Eric's dad and mom doing what they do. But that challenge coin right there is, we designed that and we wanted something to honor Eric. And all the money from that challenge coin funded the Eric Williams Scholarship is that money from that coin sale. Warden Ebert and I and Paul Gibson did the debrief for this at the Ntoa conference this past September in DC, and just it brings it all back, What really struck me and the after effects of that was the preparing for Eric's funeral and the wake and the memorial and stuff, and the outpouring of everybody around the country that showed up. I've never seen anything in my life like that. And what really struck me, and still to this day is profound to me, is we had staff members volunteering around our region, especially, but they would come in from Allenwood, from New York, from Raybrook. Staff from all over were coming and volunteering to work our staff's shifts so we could have time off. And they were working shifts for us, and so they
Wow.
could go. We could go to the funeral. We could do those things that we needed to do. That was something. I don't know if you guys remember that, but you don't see that very often.
No.
Being an EPO, learning from the disturbances that I had, I knew that I needed to train. I knew I needed to. I didn't know what I didn't know at the time, and so I knew that I needed to go outside and look for higher level training to make me better, so I could make my staff better. And one of those organizations that I kind of went with, and I went to a less lethal class in Ashtabula, Ohio. And the organization is the National Tactical Officers Association, or the NTOA. And the NTOA was started in 1983 by a gentleman by the name of John Coleman. And John Coleman kind of saw that there was a need for smaller departments that didn't have access to like large, like NYPD or federal agencies. We have a lot of resources available to us. And so the NTOA was created to provide training and provide support for smaller departments to give them that higher level of training as well. So I went to a less lethal class in Ashtabula, Ohio in actually 2012. And that was one of the best classes that I ever went to. And the reason I say that is I've been to manufacturers' less lethal classes. And the manufacturer less lethal class, if you've ever been to one, they talk about their product and they talk about a sales pitch. The NTOA class really taught me why are you doing what you're doing when you're doing it. It's more of a tactic-based class, not trying to sell me anything, but they showed us all the different munitions out there. And I opened my eyes, that class. And I had some really wonderful instructors come in. And those instructors, the one instructor became the section chair for less lethal. And he said, "Hey, Bob, you've been doing this for a while. I'm looking for a person to help us teach. Why don't you jump on board with us?" And so I jumped on board with him and I started teaching less lethal with the NTOA.
For those who may not know, what is the mission and the goal of the National Tactical Officers Association, or NTOA? The mission of the NTOA is to enhance the performance and professional status of law enforcement personnel by providing a credible and proven training. NTOA's ultimate goal is to improve public safety and domestic security through training, education, and tactical excellence. Now, that's the website definition. As staff members progress through their careers, especially moving into leadership, this early on high quality training will make them comfortable in their own skin and confident when making very difficult tactical decisions. And correct me if I'm wrong, the NTOA already has 50 plus courses that are either online, in the classroom, or practical application courses. We've had some conversations on this podcast regarding the corrections industry and nationally recognized gold standard training. It sounds like you and the NTOA are steering toward that direction. What are the goals for the association in terms of training and supporting correctional staff nationwide?
So there's a big push right now with the NTOA, and I'm also serving as the section chair for corrections for the NTOA. And that push specifically is to corrections world. We all know that corrections guys kind of get the bottom of the barrel of the training, and we kind of looked upon, and I saw that, and I would go and teach these less lethal classes to a bunch of SWAT guys, and I wanted them to know that we probably use more less lethal in corrections than they do on the street, probably their whole career. That we do it in a year than they do in their career, and I wanted to bring the level of, I don't want to say recognition, but I wanted to bring the level of our professionalism what we've all chosen to do to a higher standard. And NTOA really kind of provides me with the avenue to do that. So I was approached by Thor, who was the chairman for the NTOA, and he's like, "There's an untapped resource that we need to help in law enforcement, and that's corrections. Can you help us build classes that are needed for corrections guys?" And honestly, they rightfully said, "We don't know anything about corrections, so we need some help." And so one of the things that we need most help with is probably the basic use of force classes. Graham versus Connor is a big one that a lot of guys don't understand. They don't understand use of force, when I can use force and when I can't use force. The court case Whitley versus Albers is the big one that we look at in corrections that you need to know. And remember, you're not going to rise to the occasion. You're going to fall to your level of training. And if you don't know when I can use force and when I can't use force, we set our guys and gals up for failure. And as leaders and as trainers, I saw an avenue to make that better. And so I'm really taking the opportunity that the NTOA has given me as a less lethal instructor for those many years to establish those relationships, transitioning over to the section chair of corrections. And we have some really good classes coming out, and we're planning for some really good training that's nationally accredited. And we right now we have a partnership with Gypstick. It's the Georgia public safety facility down there. It's their academy, but they have tons of resources for us to be able to use. And so that's where we're going to spearhead and start a lot of these classes, is going to be at that facility, because they have a courthouse, they have a jail, they have a driving range, they have firing ranges. So they have all the resources that we can use down there. They have housing for people that want to attend the class. So it's like a little mini FLETC, if you will, a little mini Glencoe or academy. So it's a great partnership.
So Robert, when you're talking about the munitions and everything, and that's just it, now there's multiple manufacturers who make these types of munitions. And you said something very important earlier, and that is we need to take the munitions and apply tactics to them. It sure saves an awful lot of stress, like you talked about, in the incidents that you ran, where now you have a better understanding of the whys and you have a better understanding of how to use them.
Yeah. One of my favorite classes a section that I teach in our less lethal is on OODA loop. I don't know if you guys all heard of OODA loop, right? Observe, orient, decide, and act. Well, the most important part of that whole thing is the orientation phase. And a lot of people don't understand what that means. Like when I talk about orientation, is you think about a roadmap. How do you orientate a map, right? We all know when we look at a map, we know directions on it. We know there's a compass on there, north, south, east, and west. But there's that compass rose on that map. So that tells me the direction of the road signs, or the direction of the roads. The next thing I do is I take that compass, right? And it's always going to point to magnetic north, because that's a constant. So I take that, I point magnetic north, and I align that with the north on the map. That's how we orientate a map. And so my point is when I'm a brand new rookie officer, and I do this for street cops, think about, you get a call. You know where Main Street is, and maybe you know where First Street is, and they go east, west, north, south, right? So you know the general direction of that city, but I get a call and I have to go to a specific address in that jurisdiction. How do I get there? I don't know, because all I know is the main street, how to get there. So it's going to take me a lot longer. When you start training and you start having experiences, you build up that database, or that orientation. Your orientation is a database. It's an encyclopedia, if you will. So now, 30 years later, I get a call to that same address. I don't need to use GPS. I don't need to use a map, because I know all the shortcuts. I know all the back roads. I know all the little intricacies on that roadmap to get me from point A to point B faster and more efficient and safer. That's the same way our mind works when we're starting to think about tactics. And when we have contingencies, and when I only know one direction and it doesn't work, there's a roadblock there, I'm stuck. That's what we call being in a bad OODA loop, where I know I need to do something, but I don't know where I need to go because I don't know directions. So if you're training and you're having experiences, you build those pathways, if you will, where it helps you make better decisions faster, more efficiently. And less lethal are just a tool. It's just a tool to plug in to specific situations that may be appropriate for this, but may not be appropriate for that. And if I understand what the munition does, and I understand the tactics that I'm using, and I understand the legal standing that I can use it or not use it, you're gonna make good decisions. And that's the basis of when you start breaking down tactical decision making. And I didn't know that years ago. And the NTOA and the training and the people that I've been around has really opened my eyes and matured me, if you will, to be humbled and be able to learn those things.
Hey, Bob, you mentioned this. I've had many trainers say police departments are more than willing to cut checks to train their officers, but in corrections, it seems like it's pulling teeth. Are you seeing that in the training world? And if so, why? Is it budget? Is it lack of understanding? Is it staffing? Is it just behind the times? What say you?
So I think a lot of it is corrections is kind of hidden, right? We're not out in the open on stuff, so we're not on Front Street. You're not cell phone camera all the time. So I don't want to say it's not in the light of day per se. As far as when we use force, it's not blasted out there. So I think that's part of it. The other part of it is what's the first thing that people cut when budgets are concerned, and especially corrections is going to be probably not get the full budget on stuff as a police department would. So they're going to cut training hours, and they're going to cut training, maybe equipment and stuff like that. But there's a couple court cases that you can reference to really talk about that, and it falls under that deliberate indifference thing. And Davis versus Mason County is one that we look at. And when you don't give proper training, you become liable as an agency or as a department. And so that's one of those things that we really kind of stress is training. You can't cut it. And it's not good enough to give you a piece of equipment and say, here you go, Chris, here's the trigger on that. You point that launcher that direction, you're good to go. You have to incorporate the legal aspects of it. You have to incorporate the tactical decision making. You have to incorporate all those things that make good decisions building up to it. And then that builds your training program. And I think that they cut training because of budget is a big thing. But if you go back to the whole understanding OODA loop and understanding the liability aspect of it, and you start talking to them about liability, I sell it to them like insurance. Everybody understands car insurance. Everybody understands home insurance. Everybody has it. How many times have you used a homeowner's policy when something's happened? Probably not very often, but you have it in case you need it. That's what training is heaven forbid you ever need that training that you've been training for. But when you do need it, you're going to be really thankful that you invested in the time and the energy into your officers to make good decisions because of that liability aspect, not only for the department as a whole, but just for the safety and well-being of your officer. Very important. But that is one of those things that gets caught.
You correct me if I'm wrong, but more training, better training, less liability.
100%.
Yeah, and you said it. It's almost, and again, I'll say it. It's almost like corrections is a forgotten job. You hear fire, you hear police. You very rarely hear corrections. And
Yes.
and I say it, and I'll say it 100 more times. If you've never done it, you have nothing to even think about what it entails to do the job in the situations that we're in. We're in it just as much as any other law enforcement. I don't care where you are, or who you are, or what you do. We're in the thick of things just like they are, and we're trained. We're the less trained out of law enforcement, and that's a damn shame.
That's one of my things with the Ntoa. I used to get frustrated because I'd be a national trainer, right? I'd be a national trainer with the Ntoa, but that when you go back and teach your own people, they'd be on their cell phones or they'd be reading the newspaper, not kind of paying attention to you. And that would frustrate me as an instructor when I'd go back to my own agency and do that stuff. And I was asking my mentor, Dave, I said, Dave, do you ever find that? I mean, you do, expert witness testimony all over the world. You're the section chair for less lethal. And he goes, same thing happens to me when I go back to my department. He goes, you're never a prophet in your own land. Number one, understand that. And number two, if you can change one person's mind in that room where they do things a little bit better than they did yesterday, a little bit safer, and you gave them a little piece of knowledge where they're doing it better, then you're a successful instructor. And I really took that to heart, and I learned from that. And I didn't look at the whole room as I need to change everybody in here to do it the way I'm telling them to do it. If I can change one person's attitude or ego or mindset and learn one little tactic, then you're successful. And that's how you build. And then that does spread. Um, it's contagious. And so that's kind of how I looked at stuff, honestly. And that makes it easy to be a trainer when you do it that way.
Can you share some of the upcoming training events and some of the initiatives that you have going on with the NTOA? What can we see in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have five to six programs or classes that we're pushing out here, and we're trying to be kind of broad in what we do. We're going to start out with two classes, and one of them is going to be a use of force class or cell extraction class. That seems to be universal and it's needed to do it safely within law, policy, and ethics. And we kind of see that some people don't do it correctly, and if we can give them a little bit of tips and pointers to do it safely and do it within legal ramifications, then awesome. So we have a 3-day class of cell extraction that is completed and will be pushed out, where we're going to do some live extractions, and we're going to do chemical agent, that type of stuff incorporated in there. Another one of the classes that we are ready to roll with is going to be a 4-day basic sort operator class. That's going to kind of give them basic tactics and kind of help you understand maybe if you're going to maybe a CERT type team, we're going to give you some skills and stuff that way. That class is ready to roll. And then we also have a high risk escort class. If you're a sheriff's deputy, you're going to have a lot of sheriffs that escort inmates and people back and forth to court, to hospitals, all over. So that's a need that we see out there. And then we have some online stuff that we're looking to doing as well. And as far as the intel world, we have some high speed individuals that are renowned people in the counterterrorism world. Some of the county jails, I don't think have access to, they don't know if they have a terrorist or what some tattoos are or what this. So I think there's a need for that type of training as well that we can do online. We can also do in person. We're also looking at doing a conference. We do a national SWAT conference every single year for the NTOA, and we do a hostage negotiations conference that's separate from that, an HNT conference, and we are looking to do a corrections separate conference away from that. We did do an online one back when a couple years ago. We did it online, and we had some really good high-speed individuals give some classes. That was very well attended. We had about 200 to 300 people online, which is a lot. And various classes that we did and stuff like that. So that is the future. What we're kind of looking at doing is providing high quality training and evolving as we go. The stuff that we're doing is a way of doing business. It's not the way or the only way. And we're going to show a way and a tactic that works. And it's all within that law, policy, and ethics. And we can back it up and we can repeat it and we can defend it. And that's kind of the goal of the NTOA and kind of how we're looking at doing that training moving forward.
Hey, Bobby, I want to say thank you for remaining engaged in quality training for correctional professionals. I believe you and the NTOA can be that moving force to set the gold standard for corrections, not only in training, but education. I so appreciate passionate people like you trying to make corrections community better, even after your retirement. Stay focused, stay at it, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Pete.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for being here. And remember, if you like the content on this show, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe. That really means a lot. That means that our content is what you want to see. You can also get a hold of us at correctionsunfiltered@gmail.com. Let us know some of the subjects you'd like to cover. And Bob, I'll put some of your information for NTOA, and we'll make sure we get as much word as we possibly can out there. So once again, on behalf of Corrections Unfiltered, thanks for coming on here, Mr. Sorensen. We really appreciate the information.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a pleasure.